Ancient maps hold secrets that could rewrite history itself. Medieval cartographers drew coastlines of lands like the Americas long before their official discovery. These were not fantasies but detailed records on vellum and parchment, suggesting voyages and knowledge lost to time. By the end of this journey, you will see the age of exploration in a completely new light. How did mapmakers chart continents they could not possibly have visited? What forgotten journeys do these lines on parchment represent? What does it mean when the past holds maps of a future it was not supposed to know? How much of our history is still waiting to be found? Medieval mapmakers saw the world through two very different lenses. One vision was drawn for the soul, the other for the ship. The Grand Mappamundi, those sprawling maps of the world found in churches and monasteries, were not meant for navigation. They were spiritual diagrams, placing Jerusalem at the heart of creation and illustrating a sacred history filled with biblical events and mythical creatures. To use such a map for a sea voyage would be like trying to find your way through a city using a stained glass window. But at the very same time, in the bustling port cities of the Mediterranean, a different kind of map was being meticulously crafted. These were the Portolan charts, stitched together from the hard-won knowledge of countless sailors. These charts were astonishingly accurate, drawn on vellum with a web of room lines radiating from compass roses. They detailed coastlines, harbors, and even shifting winds with a clarity that feels almost modern. A captain could genuinely use a portolan to navigate from Genoa to Alexandria, trusting its precise rendering of the sea. So we have two parallel worlds of knowledge. One, a symbolic landscape of faith, the other, a practical tool born from direct experience, yet sometimes the line between them blurred completely. A mythical island from a Mappamundi might find its way onto a sailor's chart, or a strangely accurate coastline from an ancient, forgotten source would be copied onto a new map, nestled beside drawings of sea monsters. This unique blend of myth, religion, and raw empirical data is the very soil from which our mysterious maps grew. To find a continent that should not be there, you must first understand the complex and contradictory maps that supposedly did not know it existed. The Vinland Map appears to be a direct window into a secret history. It is a simple sketch drawn on what seems to be aged parchment, and it shows Europe, Africa, and Asia with the expected shapes of the 15th century. But to the west, beyond the coast of Greenland, it shows a large, unmistakable island. Its label is clear, Vinland. This name comes straight from the Norse sagas, the epic stories of Leif Erikson and his voyage to a new land around the year 1000. The map even includes a Latin inscription that tells the story of Bjarni and Leif discovering this country. If this map is genuine, it means that a European cartographer not only knew of North America, but was drawing it decades before Christopher Columbus ever set sail. It would be the single most important map in the history of the New World, a snapshot of a discovery the world had forgotten. But here is where the mystery deepens into a fierce debate that has raged for decades. The very ink used to draw the Vinland map is the center of the storm. When scientists analyzed it, they found a compound called anatase, a form of titanium dioxide that was not commonly used in inks until the 20th century. This finding pointed directly to a modern forgery, an elaborate hoax designed to rewrite history for fame or fortune. Yet other researchers have pushed back, suggesting the anatase could be a contaminant, or that it formed naturally in the medieval ink over centuries. The parchment itself has been carbon dated to the correct period, around the 1400s, so we are left with a profound contradiction. Is the map a brilliant fake, its ancient materials cleverly doctored with modern chemicals? or is it a genuine artifact with its anomalous ink simply being something we do not yet fully understand about medieval chemistry? This single document captures the entire dilemma of our search for lost knowledge. It forces us to ask how we can ever truly know the past when the evidence itself can be so perfectly ambiguous. The Vinland Map is a ghost at the feast of history, a tantalizing possibility that we cannot quite prove or dismiss. And it is this very uncertainty that propels us to look for other maps, ones whose existence is not so hotly contested, but whose details are perhaps even more impossible to explain. While the Vinland Map remains a ghost of a possibility, another chart from the same era presents a mystery with physical evidence we can still hold in our hands. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis compiled a world map that has stunned researchers for centuries. The surviving fragment, drawn on gazelle skin, is a masterpiece of detail. It shows the Atlantic Ocean with the west coast of Africa and the east coast of South America, rendered with a precision that seems to defy its time. But the true shock lies to the south. Below the known world, the map depicts a long, rugged coastline that many argue is a near-perfect match for Queen Maud Land in Antarctica. This is the heart of the enigma. Antarctica was not officially sighted until 1820, over 300 years after this map was drawn, and its coastline has been buried under a mile-thick sheet of ice for at least 6,000 years. So what is this landmass doing on a map from 1513? Piri Reis himself provided a tantalizing clue. In his notes, he openly stated that he was not the original explorer. He was a compiler using a library of ancient source maps for his work. He specifically cited charts from the time of Alexander the Great and even maps from the legendary Library of Alexandria. This admission is a seismic event in the history of cartography. It suggests that the knowledge on his map was not new, but was instead preserved from a much older, sophisticated seafaring culture. A culture that might have mapped the world during a warmer epoch when the Antarctic coast was free of ice. Could this be true? Could the Piri Reis map be a medieval photocopy of a far more ancient original? Skeptics offer a different interpretation. They propose that the mysterious southern land is not Antarctica at all, but a theoretical Great South Continent, a common speculative feature on maps of the period. They suggest the accurate coastlines of the Americas simply reflect information gathered from European explorers, perhaps even secret Portuguese voyages. Yet this does not fully explain the topographic accuracy of the Antarctic-like coast, a detail that would be pure guesswork. The debate itself is a testament to the map's power. It forces us to confront a staggering idea: that our planet may have been thoroughly mapped by an advanced seafaring civilization thousands of years before the age of exploration. A civilization whose maps were lost when the Great Library burned, but whose fragments were copied and recopied by scribes and sailors who did not fully understand what they were preserving. The Piri Reis map is not just a drawing, it is a message in a bottle from the ancient world, and its contents challenge the very timeline of human discovery. If the Piri Reis map hints at knowledge from the ancient world, the Cantino Planisphere shows us that secrecy was the currency of the Renaissance age. This map was born from an act of high-stakes espionage. In 1502, an Italian agent named Alberto Cantino smuggled it out of Portugal, risking everything to deliver it to his patron, the Duke of Ferrara. Its creation came just 2 years after the Portuguese explorer Pedro Álvares Cabral officially set foot in Brazil. Yet the map's depiction of the South American coastline is startlingly mature. It captures the distinct bulge of Brazil with a confident, sweeping curve, and it even hints at the massive delta of the Amazon River. How could Portuguese cartographers have achieved such precision in what was supposedly only 2 years of cursory coastal exploration? The timeline feels impossibly tight. Charting a coastline, especially one as vast and complex as Brazil's, was a slow and dangerous process of trial and error. Ships had to sail close to shore, taking soundings and noting landmarks, a task that could take many voyages over many years. The detail on the Cantino Planisphere suggests a familiarity that goes far beyond a single, fleeting contact. This has led to a compelling and controversial idea. What if the Portuguese already knew? What if Cabral's celebrated discovery was not a discovery at all, but a calculated public announcement of a land they had been secretly exploring for years? There are whispers of earlier voyages, ships that sailed into the Western Atlantic and never returned, or whose records were deliberately purged from the official logs to protect a national secret. Another possibility is that the Portuguese did not just rely on their own ships. They were master navigators and traders, and it is entirely plausible that they encountered indigenous peoples along the African coast or in the Atlantic who possessed their own sophisticated knowledge of lands across the water. Could a Portuguese captain have traded for a map drawn on bark or etched into a piece of leather, a map that showed the other side of the ocean? The Cantino Planisphere is more than a beautiful artifact. It is a snapshot of a world where information was power, and power was worth lying for. It reveals the cutthroat nature of the age of exploration, where nations hoarded geographical secrets like gold, each one desperate for an advantage in the race to claim the world. This map forces us to see history not as a series of neat, official discoveries, but as a shadowy game of spies and state secrets, where the full story was often hidden in a smuggler's case far from the public record. While nations raced for southern lands, a Venetian family claimed a secret history of the frozen north. The Zeno map of 1558 presents a phantom geography drawn from a stack of old letters. Its publisher, Niccolò Zeno, said it was based on the accounts of his ancestors, 2 brothers who sailed the North Atlantic in the 1300s. The result is a cartographic ghost story. It shows Greenland with a shape so accurate it seems impossible for its time, a ragged coastline that would not be officially mapped for another 2 centuries. Yet right beside this reality floats a cluster of islands that never existed. A place called Friesland appears repeatedly on later maps, a phantom that confused explorers for hundreds of years. And to the west, the map shows a vast land named Estatiland. The descriptions are incredibly specific. Niccolò Zeno wrote of a country with large cities, sophisticated people who had books in their own language, and a monastery of Christian monks. This sounds like pure fantasy, a traveler's tall tale, but then you look at the location. Estatiland sits where Newfoundland and Labrador are. We know the Norse were there at Elant's Ox Meadows, a settlement dating back to the year 1000. Could Estatiland be a distorted, embellished memory of a real Norse colony that persisted for centuries, a lost Viking outpost in the New World? The Zeno map forces us to become detectives of distortion. Friesland is likely a mischarted Iceland, its familiar details twisted by a copyist's error or a foggy memory. But the accurate Greenland and the possible North American coast suggest a core of truth buried under layers of myth. This map is not a forgery like the Vinland Map might be, nor a state secret like the Cantino Planisphere. It is something else entirely, a family legend written onto parchment. It is the cartographic equivalent of a grandmother's old story, where real events and places are remembered alongside imagined details, all blended into a single, compelling narrative. The true value of the Zeno map is not in its mythical lands, but in its proof that the echoes of Norse voyages lingered for centuries in the memories of European families, waiting for someone to piece them back together, however imperfectly. These phantom islands challenge our definition of a lie. They are not mere fiction but failed geography, desperate attempts to make sense of half-remembered truths. While European powers guarded their secrets in the Atlantic, a world away in Korea, a different kind of map was being drawn. The Kangnido map of 1402 presents a view of the Earth that is completely centered on Asia. Europe is a tiny, distorted sliver on the far left, and Africa is a strange, rectangular peninsula. To the eyes of someone used to modern maps, it looks upside down and inside out. But its distortions reveal its purpose. This was not a chart for sailors, but a philosophical statement, a visual representation of the known world from the heart of the Joseon dynasty. It synthesizes a river of knowledge flowing from Chinese geographers, Islamic scholars, and Korean cartographers, a testament to a vast information network that stretched across the entire Old World. The most captivating mystery lies to the east of China. The map shows a large, ambiguous landmass in the ocean. Its shape is not the familiar outline of the Americas, but more of a symbolic blob. Could this be a stylized representation of North America, based on whispers and rumors that traveled across the Pacific? Could it be a composite of Aleutian Islands and vague reports from fishermen who ventured too far? The map offers no labels to confirm this, only a tantalizing blank space where a continent should be. Its existence is a powerful reminder that the age of discovery was not a solo performance by Europe. It was a chorus of overlapping voices, many of which have been silenced by time. Sophisticated knowledge of geography was circulating in Seoul and Beijing, in Samarkand and Baghdad, long before Columbus pleaded his case before the Spanish court. The Kangnido map forces us to ask a profound question. If this much information was being shared and recorded across Asia, how much more was lost? What other voyages, what other contacts have vanished from the record, leaving only a ghostly shape on a map as their sole memorial? This single artifact shatters the myth of a pre-discovery world where the oceans were empty and the continents were silent. It suggests a globe that was far more connected and far more curious than our history books often admit. The line between a sailor's tall tale and a state secret is often drawn on a map. In 1436, the Venetian cartographer Andrea Bianco completed a world map that captures this ambiguity perfectly. Its depiction of the Atlantic Ocean is a masterclass in the known and the unknown existing side by side. Alongside the familiar Azores, islands that were well documented by Portuguese explorers, Bianco drew a large, rectangular landmass he called Antalya. This was not a vague blob or a decorative monster. It was a specific shape placed at a precise longitude and latitude, as if it were a real destination. Antalya was a legend given form. Portuguese folklore told of 7 Christian bishops who fled the Moorish conquest of the Iberian Peninsula, sailing west to found 7 cities on a bountiful island. It was a story of refuge and faith, but on Bianco's map it became a geographical fact, and Antalya was rarely alone. On many Portolan charts, it was accompanied by another mysterious island, often named Satanas, or the Island of Devils. This pairing is crucial. Why would a devilish place be so methodically charted next to a holy refuge? The answer lies in the practical nature of these maps. They were tools for survival. A captain navigating the vast, empty Atlantic would use any point of reference, real or imagined, to plot his course. The consistent placement of Antalya and Satanas across different charts suggests they were more than myth. They were waypoints, perhaps based on the account of a single ship blown far off course, a crew that saw distant land on the horizon but never made landfall. The islands became a cartographic shorthand for something seen but not yet understood. This transforms the story from simple folklore into something far more intriguing. What if Antalya was not a mythical refuge for bishops, but a cartographic placeholder for the Caribbean islands? What if the large, rectangular shape was a clumsy attempt to represent the landmass of Cuba or Hispaniola, described by a sailor who glimpsed it but never charted its full extent? The Phantom Islands were stepping stones in the mind, preparing the way for the physical leaps that would follow. They were the drafts of discovery, the rumors that guided the rudder. When Columbus set sail, he carried maps filled with these phantoms, and he was actively looking for Antalya. He was not sailing into a complete void, but into a space populated by the ghosts of earlier, unrecorded voyages. The Bianco map is a testament to that hidden knowledge, a quiet suggestion that the ocean was not nearly as empty as the history books would have us believe. But the Mediterranean had its own master of the map, a man who wove the entire known world into a single, breathtaking tapestry. The Catalan Atlas of 1375 is not merely a map. It is a panoramic vision of the 14th century world, a sprawling work of art and science commissioned for a king of France. Its creator, Abraham Cresques, was a Jewish cartographer from the island of Majorca, a crossroads of cultures where Christian, Jewish, and Muslim knowledge flowed freely. He drew from the most advanced sources of his day, stitching together the accounts of Marco Polo, the calculations of Islamic astronomers, and the hard-won charts of Genoese sailors. The result is a map that feels both ancient and startlingly modern. Gaze upon its panels and you journey from the familiar castles of Europe, past the bustling trade routes of the Silk Road where camel caravans march in painted lines, all the way to the courts of the Great Khan in Cathay. For the first time on a European map, Japan appears as a distinct island named Sipangu, placed with an accuracy that would be lost on maps for the next 200 years. The Atlas is a testament to the global network of information that existed long before European ships rounded the Cape of Good Hope. Its depiction of Africa is particularly telling. While the southern extent of the continent is still a mystery, the western coast is drawn with a confidence that suggests more than guesswork. It hints at voyages, perhaps by Genoese or Portuguese adventurers, that had already ventured beyond the Pillars of Hercules and sailed south along the coast, gathering whispers of a land that curved eastward. This was the edge of the known world, the very frontier of possibility. Yet this empirical ambition is constantly framed by a vibrant, living mythology. The map is alive with illustrations. You see Mansa Musa, the legendary king of Mali, seated on his golden throne holding a massive gold nugget. You see the trade routes of the Sahara marked by tents and merchants. And you see the strange and wondrous creatures that were believed to inhabit the Earth's remote corners, from the one-legged cyapod who uses his single foot for shade to the griffin guarding its gold in the Asian steppes. This is the true genius of the Catalan Atlas. It makes no firm distinction between what was traded, what was traveled, and what was dreamed. It presents the world not as a collection of facts, but as a story, a grand narrative of human commerce, faith, and curiosity. It represents the absolute peak of medieval knowledge, a summit reached just before the horizon exploded with new continents. Abraham Cresques did not map the Americas, but he mapped the mind that would soon discover them, a mind filled with accurate coastlines and golden cities, with real caravans and imagined monsters, all coexisting on the same piece of vellum. The Atlas is a portrait of a world poised on the brink, holding its breath before the leap into the unknown. The Genoese World Map of 1457 stands as a silent witness to a world in flux. It is a beautiful, confusing, and revolutionary document all at once. On one hand, it clings to the old ways. You can see the classic medieval elements, like the Red Sea colored a brilliant scarlet, and the three known continents of Europe, Africa, and Asia arranged in a familiar pattern. Yet look closer, and the ground begins to shift beneath your feet. The Mediterranean Sea is rendered with the crisp, practical accuracy of a Portolan chart, a tool for sailors. But then your eye moves east to the Indian Ocean, and the map does something extraordinary. It shows this ocean as a vast, open body of water, completely unencumbered by land. This was a direct challenge to the most respected geographer in history, Claudius Ptolemy. For over 1,000 years, Ptolemy's works had declared the Indian Ocean to be a landlocked sea, cut off from the rest of the world's oceans by a mysterious southern continent that connected Africa to Asia. The Genoese mapmaker boldly rejected this ancient dogma. He drew an open ocean, a gateway to the east. How did he know? The answer almost certainly lies with the Arab traders who had been masters of the Indian Ocean for centuries. Their dhows sailed the monsoon winds from the coast of Arabia all the way to India and beyond, reaching the Spice Islands of Indonesia and perhaps even the shores of China. Their knowledge, funneled through the trade hubs of the Mediterranean, was finally breaking into the European consciousness. This map is that moment of collision, a splash of cold, hard, empirical reality onto the parchment of inherited tradition. And in the south, the map adds its most enduring mystery. It depicts a great southern continent, a massive landmass at the bottom of the world. This was not the detailed Antarctica of the Piri Reis Map, but a speculative shape, a placeholder for the unknown. Yet its very presence is significant. It represents a dawning realization that the world was much larger than the old authorities had claimed. The mapmaker, armed with new reports, was willing to chart what he did not fully understand, to leave a space on the map for discoveries yet to come. The Genoese world map captures the precise instant when the medieval mind, so long confined by ancient texts, finally peeked over the wall and saw a horizon that stretched into infinity. It is the cartographic equivalent of a deep breath before a great leap. But the map that may have launched the most famous voyage in history was drawn in a German workshop. Henricus Martellus created his monumental world map in 1489, a masterpiece of synthesis that pulled together every scrap of available information. It was a vision of the world at a tipping point. On this map, Africa is no longer a truncated mystery. Its southern coast sweeps elegantly around the Cape of Good Hope, a direct result of Bartholomew Diaz's recent voyage that proved the Indian Ocean was accessible from the west. This was the bleeding edge of discovery captured in ink and paint, yet this accuracy in the south was paired with a profound distortion in the east. Martellus depicted the world as far more elongated from west to east than it actually is. On his map, the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean is dramatically shrunken, and the island of Cipangu, or Japan, appears tantalizingly close to the coast of Europe. This was the map's dangerous gift. It presented a world that seemed conquerable, a planet where sailing west to reach the riches of Asia was not a fool's errand, but a plausible, even straightforward endeavor. We have strong evidence that Christopher Columbus studied this very map, or one nearly identical to it. He would have seen that shortened distance and clung to it, using it to bolster his arguments before the Spanish court. The miscalculation on the Martellus map did not just influence Columbus, it enabled him. It gave him the confidence to risk everything on a calculation that was fundamentally wrong, yet historically transformative. This is the ultimate power of a map. It is not merely a reflection of reality, but an active force that shapes it. The expectations drawn on Martellus's parchment directly fueled the voyages that would ultimately render his own work obsolete. The map that contained no hint of the Americas was paradoxically one of the primary reasons they were stumbled upon. It is a humbling lesson in how a single document, blending the latest facts with enduring errors, can bend the arc of history itself, sending ships into the void based on a beautiful, persuasive, and ultimately illusory truth. But a name can be as powerful as a discovery. In a small German town in 1507, a cartographer named Martin Waldseemüller published a map that did more than just chart new lands, it gave them an identity. This is the map that christened a continent, America. It is often called the birth certificate of the New World, and for good reason. Before this, the strange lands across the Atlantic were often seen as mere appendages to Asia, mysterious outposts on the way to Cathay. Waldseemüller's map shattered that illusion. For the first time, he depicted the Americas as what they truly were, two vast continents, completely separate from Asia and entirely surrounded by water. This was a conceptual earthquake. He based this revolutionary idea on the accounts of the explorer Amerigo Vespucci, who was among the first to argue that these lands were a new world, a fourth part of the globe. In a gesture of respect, Waldseemüller named the southern continent America after him. The name stuck and a hemisphere was forever branded, yet the map's accuracy is as baffling as its insight. It shows a slender, graceful South America, with a western coastline that drops away into a massive, empty expanse of ocean. This is the Pacific, a body of water that no European explorer would officially lay eyes on for another 6 years, when Vasco Núñez de Balboa would cross the Isthmus of Panama. So how did Waldseemüller know? How could he possibly have drawn this vast aquatic frontier? The most compelling theory points to secrets, to classified reports from Portuguese or Spanish voyages that never entered the public record. Perhaps a ship, blown wildly off course, glimpsed the open waters to the south of the continent. Or perhaps cartographers, piecing together dozens of confidential pilot logs, deduced the existence of a great ocean based on the sheer length of the coastline they were documenting. Waldseemüller's map is a work of both staggering prescience and educated guesswork. It captures the exact moment when speculation crystallized into geographical fact. With a single act of naming and drawing, he codified a new reality for the entire world. He took the scattered rumors and half-understood charts and forged them into a coherent image that would shape all future exploration. This was the moment the New World was truly born, not in a jungle or on a beach, but on a printer's press in Germany, a phantom given a name and a place on the map for all time. While Waldseemüller was giving a continent its name in Germany, a Portuguese cartographer was quietly finishing a map that charted its northern doorway. The Turin Map of 1523 is a masterpiece of practical knowledge, a Portolan chart dedicated entirely to the North Atlantic. With stunning clarity, it draws a continuous coastline running from the icy shores of Greenland all the way down to the peninsula of Florida. This was not a speculative guess or a phantom island. This was a confident, unified vision of the entire eastern seaboard of North America, decades before any other European power could claim such comprehensive knowledge. How did the Portuguese achieve this? The map itself is a testament to the voyages of the Court Real brothers and other explorers who braved the treacherous fog banks of the North Atlantic. But the level of detail suggests something far beyond a few landmarking expeditions. The accurate rendering of bays, river mouths, and coastal contours implies repeated journeys, perhaps even seasonal visits by fishing fleets that have left no official trace. This points to a shadow history of exploration, one driven not by glory but by cod. The waters off Newfoundland were a natural larder, teeming with fish that could feed a nation. It is entirely plausible that Portuguese fishermen established secret, temporary camps on those shores, drying their catch and trading with indigenous peoples, all while carefully charting the land for their own use. Their logs would have been commercial secrets, not documents for kings, which is why they vanished from the official record. The Turin map is the ghost of that enterprise. It codifies a parallel age of discovery that was conducted in silence for profit rather than fame. It forces us to reconsider the very nature of exploration. The great voyages of Columbus and Cabot were state-sponsored media events, but the real work of mapping the world was often done by anonymous sailors and fishermen, men who kept their discoveries to themselves to protect a lucrative fishing ground or a safe harbor. This map is their silent witness, a reminder that history is written by the victors, but it is often charted by the pragmatists. Yet the Portuguese were not the only ones guarding secrets in the northern seas. Far to the south, in the bustling French port of Dieppe, another cartographic mystery was taking shape. Throughout the 1540s and 50s, a school of master mapmakers produced a series of stunningly beautiful and bewildering world charts. Known collectively as the Deep Maps, these were lavishly illustrated works of art commissioned for kings and nobles. At first glance, they appear to be the height of Renaissance geography. But look into the vast emptiness of the southern Indian and Pacific Oceans, and you will find a land that should not exist. They called it Java la Grande. This was not a small island, but a massive continent, drawn with a long, ragged coastline that bears a haunting, if warped, resemblance to the western shore of Australia. The maps label its features with French and Portuguese names, describing rivers, capes, and even kingdoms. How could French cartographers, who had no known ships in those waters, possibly chart a continent that would not be officially discovered for another 200 years? The most plausible explanation is one of espionage and imitation. Dieppe was a hub for navigators and explorers, and France was a rival to Portugal. It is almost certain that the Dieppe cartographers got their hands on secret Portuguese charts, perhaps from a captured ship or a bribed pilot. The Portuguese, the masters of the Indian Ocean, may have indeed stumbled upon Australia's northern coast, and that knowledge, filtered through the lens of French ambition, became Java la Grande. But the Deep Maps are more than just stolen secrets. They are a fascinating blend of hard data and pure fantasy. Alongside the plausible shape of Australia, you find completely fictional coastlines and islands sprinkled throughout the Pacific. This was not necessarily deceit. It was the cartographic mind at work, trying to connect the dots. A sailor's report of a distant mountain range might be drawn as a full coastline. A story about a land of gold from a Malayan trader might be transformed into a labeled kingdom on a new continent. The Deep School did not have the luxury of satellite imagery. They had fragments, rumors, and a powerful desire to complete the picture. They were filling the blank spaces with the only tools they had: speculation and educated guesswork. These maps are a testament to the human urge to make sense of the unknown, even if that means drawing it first and discovering it later. Java la Grande was a phantom, but it was a phantom born from real whispers across the water, a collective dream of a southern world that was slowly, painstakingly, being pulled from the realm of myth into the light of the map. 2 centuries after the age of exploration had supposedly mapped the world, a French geographer presented a vision of its final frontier that defied all contemporary knowledge. In 1737, Philippe Buach unveiled a map of the southern hemisphere that was both a work of speculative science and a ghostly echo. His chart depicted Antarctica not as a single frozen mass, but as 2 distinct landmasses separated by a wide icy sea. This was a staggering proposition. At the time, no ship had even sighted the Antarctic coast, let alone mapped its interior. Buach claimed his radical depiction was not a guess, but was reconstructed from ancient source maps that had survived from classical antiquity. He was, in effect, suggesting that the knowledge of a pre-glacial Antarctica, first hinted at on the Piri Reis Map, had been preserved through the centuries, copied and recopied by scribes who did not understand what they were drawing, only to resurface in the heart of the Enlightenment. This claim connects the medieval Enigma directly to the dawn of modern science. It shows that the puzzle of the ancient maps was not forgotten, but had simply moved from the scriptorium to the academy. Buach was a respected cartographer, a man who helped pioneer the use of contour lines, yet here he was, championing a theory that seemed to belong to a much earlier, more mystical age. His map forces a difficult question. Was he a dupe, fooled by clever forgeries or his own imagination? Or was he a visionary, piecing together a lost truth from fragmented evidence that modern expeditions would only confirm more than a century later? We now know his map is wrong in its details, yet eerily prescient in its core idea. Satellite surveys reveal that Antarctica is, in fact, a massive archipelago of linked islands buried under the ice, a reality that somewhat mirrors Buach's two-part division. So how do we explain this? The longevity of this mystery is its most compelling feature. From the Portolan charts of the 1400s to the scientific debates of the 1700s, the ghost of a mapped southern continent never faded. It suggests that the allure of these blank spaces on the map is not just about geography, but about the very nature of knowledge itself. How much of what we discover is truly new, and how much is simply remembering what was once known, then lost, and patiently waiting to be found again on a piece of parchment. This drive to find paradise on a map often had a name. Legends like the island of High Brassel or the kingdom of Prester John were not just decorative fables. They were functional components of the medieval worldview, powerful psychological magnets that pulled ships over the horizon. When a cartographer drew the circular island of High Brassel west of Ireland, he was not necessarily lying. He was recording a persistent rumor, a story told by sailors who may have seen the distant, fog-shrouded peaks of the Azores, or who encountered the impossibly rich fishing grounds of the Grand Banks of Newfoundland. The myth became a container for a real but unverified geographical fact. It was a way of saying something is out here, even if we do not yet know its true name or shape. The same was true for the kingdom of Prester John, a fabulously wealthy Christian empire believed to be hidden somewhere in the depths of Asia or Africa. For centuries, this legend motivated kings and popes to send emissaries eastward, hoping to find a powerful ally against their enemies. These travelers never found Prester John's silver rivers or his castle of crystal, but their journeys filled in the maps of Central Asia and the coasts of Africa with real rivers and real kingdoms. The mythical destination was the excuse for the actual exploration. It provided a goal that was grand enough to justify the immense risk and cost. A sailor might not brave the terrors of the open ocean just to find a new fishing spot, but he would absolutely risk it all to find an island of eternal youth or a kingdom ruled by a priest king. The phantom lands were the dreams that charted the real world. They were the catalysts, the compelling stories that launched 1,000 ships. Every time a cartographer inked High Brassel onto a chart, he was not just drawing an island. He was drawing a question, and that question demanded an answer from the sea. So where did this impossible knowledge actually come from? The truth is likely a tangled web of lost voyages and fallen empires, a story pieced together from fragments. One compelling theory points to a sophisticated global maritime civilization from deep antiquity. Imagine the Minoans, a Bronze Age power whose palaces stood on Crete over 3,000 years ago. Their ships, adorned with vibrant sails, were the masters of the Mediterranean. Or consider the Phoenicians, the legendary traders who may have circumnavigated Africa, and whose vessels could have been swept by storms across the Atlantic. These were not primitive cultures, they were master navigators. If such a civilization had indeed mapped the world, their precious charts would have been copied and recopied for centuries, surviving the fall of their own empires in the libraries of Alexandria or Constantinople, only to be rediscovered by medieval scholars who no longer understood their true origin. Their world was our world, just seen from a different shore. A second, equally powerful theory shifts the focus eastward to the colossal treasure fleets of Ming China. In the early 15th century, Admiral Zheng he commanded an armada of hundreds of ships, some of them over 400 feet long, dwarfing the tiny caravels of Columbus. His missions took him across the Indian Ocean to the coast of Africa, and perhaps even further. While mainstream history records no Chinese landing in the Americas, it is not difficult to imagine one of his massive vessels or a smaller scout ship from his fleet being driven by a typhoon across the Pacific. The knowledge of that landfall, of a continent beyond the horizon, could have then trickled back along the Silk Road, passing from Arab traders to Italian merchants, until it finally reached a European cartographer who simply added the new coastlines to his existing map, unaware of their true source. Then there are the quiet voyages, the ones that left no monuments. For centuries before Leif Erikson, Basque whalers and Irish monks braved the North Atlantic. A Basque fishing boat pursuing cod further and further west might have made landfall on the Grand Banks. A leather-hulled currach carrying Irish monks seeking solitude could have been pushed by the gales all the way to Iceland, then Greenland, and perhaps beyond. These were not voyages of conquest, but of survival or faith. They returned with stories, not maps, and their tales of wooded shores and strange peoples would have been woven into the folklore of coastal villages, eventually reaching the ears of a mapmaker in a distant port city. Of course, the simplest explanation is that all of this is just a grand coincidence. Perhaps the accuracy of these maps is nothing more than a compilation of sailors' rumors, lucky guesses, and the human brain's tendency to see patterns where none exist. Yet when you line up all these phantom islands and misplaced continents, the sheer weight of the coincidences becomes difficult to accept. The most likely answer is that all these threads are true. There was no single source. The Minoan map, the Chinese report, the Basque fisherman's landmark, the Irish monk's tale, they all fed into a slow, cumulative process of discovery that was mostly forgotten, only to resurface mysteriously in the vellum and ink of the medieval mapmaker. Unraveling this web is the ultimate historical detective story, a puzzle where the pieces are scattered across oceans and centuries. The lines on a medieval map are not just ink, they are frozen time. To understand their secrets, we must step into the workshop of the cartographer himself, a place where science, art, and sailor's lore converged. The most advanced tool of this era was the Portolan chart, and its genius lies in a simple web of lines. Look closely at one, and you will see dozens of them radiating from central points, like the spokes of a wheel. These are room lines, and each one represents a single, constant compass bearing. A captain could lay a ruler along a room line connecting his home port to his destination, and then simply sail that exact course, adjusting for wind and current as needed. This system of dead reckoning was not about pinpoint accuracy over vast distances, but about reliable, repeatable navigation across a sea that offered few landmarks. It was a practical grid for a practical world, but how did they know how far to draw the land? Distances were often a matter of time, not space. A ship's log might note that a certain coastline took 3 days to sail past with a steady wind. The cartographer would then translate those 3 days of travel into a corresponding length on his vellum, using a standard scale that represented a day's sail. This was not a perfect system, but it was a functional one, building the world one voyage at a time. The coastlines themselves were a living library compiled from the memories of countless sailors. Each captain carried mental notes of a familiar headland, a unique river mouth, or a safe harbor. These individual observations, shared in taverns and chart houses, were slowly synthesized into a collective vision. The cartographer was the ultimate editor, taking these scattered sketches and verbal accounts and weaving them into a single, coherent picture. His role was part scientist, part storyteller. When two sailors described the same bay differently, he had to make a choice, sometimes blending the descriptions or favoring the more experienced source. This process of synthesis inevitably involved creative interpretation, which explains why some phantom islands appeared so consistently. They were a best guess based on persistent rumors. The very material these maps were drawn on, vellum, was key to their survival. Made from treated animal skin, it was incredibly durable, far more so than paper. A vellum chart could withstand the damp, salty air of a ship's cabin, the rough handling of unrolling and re-rolling, and the passage of centuries in a dusty library. This resilience is why we can study them today. When we hold a facsimile of a Portolan chart, we are not looking at a magical artifact. We are holding the culmination of generations of hard-won experience, meticulously compiled by a master craftsman. The mystery of a correctly drawn coastline fades when you realize it was built from 1,000 correct observations. The true wonder is not that they got some things wrong, but that they got so much right with the tools they had. Their craft reminds us that every line was earned, every bay was a discovery, and every map was a testament to human curiosity etched onto skin. Every line on these ancient charts ignites a fierce intellectual battle. The academic world is starkly divided on what these maps truly represent. On one side, mainstream historians urge a cautious, skeptical approach. They argue that what looks like Antarctica on the Piri Reis Map could simply be a speculative Great Southland, a common cartographic trope of the era. The apparent accuracy of certain coastlines, they suggest, might be nothing more than a lucky coincidence born from stylistic quirks or the limitations of draftsmanship. A wobbly line drawn to fit a space on the vellum might, by pure chance, resemble a real bay thousands of miles away, and of course the specter of forgery always looms. The controversy surrounding the Vinland Map's ink is a perfect example of this skepticism in action, where scientific analysis is used to challenge a seemingly revolutionary claim. For this school of thought, the established historical narrative is built on a solid foundation of verified documents and archaeological finds. These mysterious maps are seen as outliers, anomalies that are more likely to be misinterpretations or hoaxes than genuine historical evidence. But on the other side of the debate are those who see a grander, more forgotten story. Proponents of alternative history look at the same parchments and see undeniable proof of pre-Columbian transoceanic contact. To them, the precise rendering of an iced-over coastline on the Piri Reis Map is not a guess. It is a snapshot from a time when ancient mariners sailed a warmer Antarctica. They ask a simple, powerful question. How can so many maps drawn by different hands in different centuries all contain the same incredible mistakes that just happen to align with geographical reality? This is not about one single line, but a cumulative pattern of impossible knowledge that becomes harder to dismiss with each new example. The debate, at its core, is a clash of methodologies. It forces us to confront a difficult choice. Do we dismiss anomalous evidence because it does not fit our current understanding of the past? Or do we allow that evidence to challenge and potentially expand that understanding? It is a question of how history itself is written and whether we are willing to admit that our records are profoundly incomplete. This is not a quiet academic disagreement. It is a fundamental struggle over the story of humanity, fought over every peninsula and island on a piece of parchment. The ongoing battle ensures these maps will never be mere museum pieces, but permanent, provocative puzzles. The interpretation of a single, faded line can, after all, rewrite everything we thought we knew. These maps were not passive decorations in royal libraries, they were fuel for the engine of an age. When Christopher Columbus pleaded his case before the Spanish monarchs, he did not argue from a position of pure theory. He carried with him charts and books filled with the phantom islands and shortened distances of maps like the one by Henricus Martellus. That specific miscalculation, which placed Asia a seemingly achievable sail to the west, was not a simple error. It was the very catalyst that launched 3 small ships into the vastness of the Atlantic. The belief these maps provided was as critical as any compass. They transformed an unimaginable risk into a calculated venture, turning the terrifying void of the ocean into a pathway lined with rumored islands and certain riches. This was the tangible power of the cartographer's pen. It could literally change the course of ships and shape the fate of continents. Beyond the search for a westward passage, the maps also charted dreams of a more literal kind. The persistent legends of El Dorado, the Golden Man, or the Fountain of Youth were not just campfire stories. They were given geographical homes on these documents, becoming fixed destinations on the mental landscape of every ambitious conquistador. A map might show a city of gold nestled in the jungles of a newly drawn continent, or mark a spring with restorative powers on a speculative coastline. These were not innocent fantasies, they were active invitations to conquest. Hernán Cortés in Mexico and Francisco Pizarro in Peru were driven as much by these cartographic myths as by any royal decree. The search for these mythical places led to the brutal, thorough exploration of the American interior, the mapping of its great river systems, and the tragic collision of worlds. The map, in this sense, was a weapon. It was an instrument of geopolitical strategy that justified immense expenditure and human suffering in the name of discovering what was already promised on parchment. This legacy is a double-edged sword. The same documents that preserved fragments of lost knowledge also fueled an era of exploitation and colonization. They turned the unknown from a source of fear into a challenge to be overcome, a prize to be seized. The power of a line on a map to inspire both glorious discovery and profound human tragedy is perhaps the most enduring and sobering lesson they leave us. The debate over these ancient charts is no longer confined to dusty libraries. In the 21st century, science has entered the fray with a new set of tools that peer directly into the parchment itself. Multispectral imaging is like a form of technological X-ray vision for old documents. By photographing a map under different wavelengths of light, from ultraviolet to infrared, researchers can pull hidden details from the vellum. Faded ink, completely invisible to the human eye, suddenly reappears. A smudged label becomes legible, a corrected coastline emerges from beneath a later edition, or a cartographer's preliminary sketch is revealed. This process can uncover the map's entire history of creation, layer by layer. At the same time, pigment analysis allows scientists to identify the precise chemical makeup of the inks and paints used. This is a powerful forensic tool. If a map supposedly from the 1400s contains a synthetic blue pigment that was not invented until the 1800s, the forgery is exposed. Carbon dating provides another crucial piece of the puzzle, independently verifying the age of the parchment or the animal skin on which the map is drawn. These methods work together to build an unassailable profile of the artifact, separating genuine medieval mysteries from clever modern fakes. Beyond the laboratory, the view from space is revolutionizing how we measure ancient accuracy. Satellite imagery and geographic information systems, or GIS, allow us to perform a kind of digital autopsy on these old charts. We can overlay a scan of a 15th century Portolan chart onto a modern satellite map of the Mediterranean. The software can then calculate with mathematical precision the deviation of the ancient coastline from the real one. This moves the discussion from subjective visual resemblance to objective, quantifiable data. We are no longer just saying this looks like Brazil. We can now state that the curvature of this coastline on the Cantino Planisphere matches the actual Brazilian coast with 92% accuracy over a distance of 500 miles. This kind of analysis can confirm which parts of a map were based on direct observation and which were pure speculation. It can also identify systematic errors, like a consistent miscalculation of longitude that shifts an entire continent out of place. These technological advances are reopening cold cases in cartographic history, turning passionate debates into problems that can be tested and measured. The quest to understand these mysterious maps has evolved from a historian's puzzle into a high-tech endeavor, where a satellite's eye view and a spectrometer's reading are providing new keys to these ancient locks. These maps hold a magnetic pull on our imagination precisely because they are so deeply human. They speak to a part of us that craves mystery, that thrills at the idea of a hidden chapter in our own story. In a world where every square inch of the planet has been photographed from space, the notion that a piece of parchment from 500 years ago can still hold a secret is intoxicating. It challenges the comfortable, linear story we tell ourselves, the one where history is a steady march of progress from ignorance to enlightenment. These charts whisper a different tale, one where advanced knowledge can be forgotten, where entire ages of discovery can vanish into the fog, only to resurface as a ghostly coastline on a map. This is the romance of the archive, the belief that a world of wonder is still waiting, not in the jungles or the deep oceans, but in the forgotten corners of a library. The true allure lies in the possibility that history is not a settled fact, but a living puzzle. It is the intellectual satisfaction of a detective story where the clues are written in faded ink and the stakes are the very timeline of human achievement. This is why we keep returning to these enigmatic documents. They are not just maps, they are promises. They promise that the past is still an undiscovered country, full of surprises that can, at any moment, rewrite everything we thought we knew. The storm of controversy surrounding the Vinland Map is a forensic drama played out under microscopes. When it was revealed to the world in 1965, it was heralded as a sensation, a missing piece of history that confirmed the Norse sagas in graphic detail. But that initial triumph was short-lived. Scientists turned their attention to the very substance of the map, the ink that formed its lines. Their analysis revealed the presence of a specific compound, anatase, a highly refined form of titanium dioxide. This was the smoking gun. Modern 20th century inks used anatase, but it was not a known component of medieval iron gall ink. The implication was devastating. The map appeared to be an elaborate modern fake, its ancient-looking lines drawn with a contemporary chemical. Yet the case was far from closed. Other experts pointed to the physical object itself. The parchment showed distinct wormholes, tiny tunnels bored by insects centuries ago. These holes perfectly aligned with wormholes found in a genuine medieval manuscript, a 15th century book known as the Speculum Historiale, with which the map was once bound. This was powerful physical evidence. It suggested the map and the book were companions for hundreds of years, long before anyone could have forged a map of Vinland. Furthermore, some researchers challenged the ink evidence outright. They proposed that annotates could form naturally as a byproduct of the medieval ink-making process, or that it could be a contaminant from the tools used to prepare the parchment. The debate was no longer just about history, it was a clash of scientific interpretations. This single piece of parchment became a battleground for different disciplines. Historians weighed the plausibility of a 15th-century cartographer knowing of Vinland. Chemists dueled over spectral analyses and trace elements. Codicologists, the specialists who study the structure of books, scrutinized the binding and the wormholes. Each expert saw the map through a different lens, and each lens provided a different answer. The Vinland map is a perfect microcosm of this entire field of mystery. It is not one puzzle, but a series of interlocking enigmas where a chemical analysis can invalidate a historical narrative, and a wormhole can threaten to validate it. The story of the Norse in North America, a story we thought we knew from sagas and archaeology, hangs in the balance of this ongoing investigation, proving that authenticating the past is a fragile and fiercely contested science. But the true heart of the Piri Reis mystery is not just in its lines but in its words. Scattered across the gazelle skin are detailed inscriptions written by the admiral himself, and these notes are a confession of borrowed knowledge. Piri Reis openly states that his world map was compiled from no fewer than 20 source charts. He lists them with a librarian's precision: 8 Ptolemaic maps from the ancient world, 4 Portuguese charts fresh from the Voyages of discovery, an Arabic map of India, and most astonishingly, a map drawn by Christopher Columbus himself. This is not merely a map, it is a bibliography. Its value lies in this provenance, a trail of breadcrumbs leading back into a lost library of global cartography. Imagine the scope of that collection. It implies that in 1513, a Turkish admiral had access to a geographical archive that spanned from the classical calculations of Ptolemy in Alexandria to the latest, most secret findings of Portuguese and Spanish explorers. Scholars have pored over these inscriptions for decades, trying to mentally reconstruct this lost collection. Which Portuguese chart showed the bulge of Brazil with such confidence? What details did Columbus himself commit to parchment that never made it into the official logs? And most intriguing of all, what was on the Arabic map of India that was valuable enough to be included in this global synthesis? Each note is a puzzle. The inscriptions transform the map from a single image into a living conversation across time. It is a story of information exchange, where ancient Greek geography, medieval Arabic sailing directions, and Renaissance European discoveries were all woven together on a single sheet in Istanbul. The written words confirm that the map's most shocking features were not his own inventions, but details he faithfully copied from these older, vanished sources. This makes the southern continent on his map not a wild guess, but a reported fact, something he found in the ancient documents available to him. The mystery of the Piri Reis Map, therefore, deepens from a question of what he drew to a question of what he read. The hunt for his source maps is a ghost hunt, an attempt to reassemble a library that was dispersed or destroyed centuries ago, a library that may have held the true shape of the world long before the world knew itself. That ghostly coastline from a medieval chart is more than a historical curiosity. It lives on in the very DNA of our modern maps. The stylized compass rose that orients you on a hiking trail, the sea serpent playfully illustrated on a child's map. Even the phrase "here be dragons" all descend directly from the Portolan charts and Mappamundi of the Middle Ages. These are not just decorative holdovers, they are the genetic markers of a time when cartography was as much an art as a science. but the most profound inheritance is the concept of the blank space itself. The term terra incognita, unknown land, was a formal admission of ignorance, a placeholder for mystery that acknowledged the limits of human knowledge. Today, we might use different terms for the edges of our understanding, but the principle remains. We still map the dark gaps in the ocean floor, the uncharted topography of other planets, and the complex networks of the human brain, all following that same ancient tradition of marking what we do not know. This legacy forces a humbling realization upon modern cartographers. Every map, from a satellite image to a subway schematic, is a model, not a mirror. It is a deliberate simplification of reality, shaped by the choices of its creator. A medieval monk might place Jerusalem at the center of his world for spiritual reasons, just as a modern app might prioritize certain roads over others based on traffic algorithms. The quest for perfect, objective accuracy is a very modern and perhaps unattainable ideal. For most of human history, a map was a tool designed for a specific purpose, whether that was guiding a soul to salvation, a ship to harbor, or a king to conquest. The true power of these ancient documents is not that they were perfectly accurate, but that they were perfectly human. They remind us that every line drawn is a story told, a perspective offered, and a world imagined. From the contentious shores of Vinland to the icy phantom of Antarctica, these charts weave a counter-narrative that refuses to be silenced. They tell a story not of a world discovered in a single heroic age, but of a globe that was always whispering its secrets to those willing to listen. This is a history stitched together from fragments, a tale of forgotten fishermen, lost libraries, and voyages that vanished from all record. It suggests that human curiosity has always reached farther than our official timelines admit, that the oceans were never the empty barriers we once imagined, but bustling highways of ideas and encounters. The true mystery is not necessarily that these maps exist, but that we are so surprised by them. Our modern understanding of history is built on a foundation of surviving documents, but what about the countless logs and charts that were lost to fire, water, or deliberate secrecy? These mysterious maps are the lucky survivors, the few pages that slipped through the cracks of time. They force a profound humility upon us. We must accept that our knowledge of the past is incomplete, a patchwork quilt with more holes than fabric. Some of these cartographic puzzles may never be solved to everyone's satisfaction. The debate over a line of ink or a chemical signature will likely continue for generations. Yet their enduring power does not rely on a final, verifiable answer. Their value lies in the questions they force us to ask. They are permanent invitations to wonder, to explore, and to challenge the neat stories we tell ourselves. They are testaments to the human spirit, a spirit that always yearns to see what lies beyond the horizon. So the next time you glance at the perfect certainty of a digital map on your phone, remember the long and winding journey that made it possible. That clarity was earned through centuries of risk, rumor, and revision. It is the product of 1,000 lost voyages and 100 phantom islands that first taught us how to dream of distant shores. The greatest discoveries about our past may not be buried in the ground, but waiting in plain sight, patiently drawn on an ancient piece of parchment for the right curious mind to finally understand their message.